incarceration, Tucker, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today.
Do you think you'd be alive if you've never been arrested?
No, I'm pretty sure I'd probably be dead at this point, especially with what's been happening over the last 5 years. We have this progression with drugs and the sort of decrease in law enforcement engagement and court system separation from the real problem. But specifically over the last 5 years, during COVID and the George Floyd area, I've seen an exponential spiraling of the drain with the people that make up this portion of the population.
What do you mean is spiraling? Are the drugs more powerful? Are there different drugs? Are they?
Yeah, different drugs. Heroin is no longer a thing. Fentanyl now dominates the industry. I think the majority of our drugs are coming up through Mexico. We used to produce drugs right here in this country. There were much better drugs, let me tell you that, than what we're getting today. We've seen disease and destruction and overdose and
infection. You walk around with fucking disgusting sores all over your body.
I got lifestyle. We really started to see the increase in overdose about 2020. I truly believe that if incarceration and separation were not an option for me, I was arrested in 2012, and we were not pumping medication-assisted treatment drugs into everybody's life at that time the way that we are now. I truly believe that I would be dead today because of the potent nature of fentanyl, the complicitness with the industry and making this problem so acceptable that people essentially cannot get themselves out of the maze. Because when a person goes to a social service agency to get help, they're looking for a way out. And what's happening, and this is why I couldn't work in the industry anymore, what's happening is when they go to get that help, they're being handed the poisons that continue to destroy their life. And so it's like they're trying to navigate through this maze, and as soon as they get close to the door to get out of the maze, the trap door is dropped and they're rewarded with rotten fish, essentially. They're given the very thing that's destroying their life. And, our service structures are helping them kill themselves. It's really grotesque.
But, this is not a complex problem to solve, is it? Just stop making it easy for drug addicts to be addicted to drugs, and you'll save a lot of lives.
Yeah, I think it's a little even more simple than that. It's about accountability, right? So we've removed accountability from, I think, every aspect of everything in this country. We're literally, and first, I also want to say thank you for the things that you're covering. Thank you for being concerned about the bodies that we're walking over in our own country before you're being concerned about what's going on in other countries. Because we're focusing our attention so much on the lives of others while we are devaluing the lives of our own.
Get the hell out of other countries.
We are saying that the people that we're walking past that are destroying their lives are less worthy of our support than the people.
Go through the city any day now, dude, and you see people dragging their knuckles on the ground with sores all over them.
That's really, in my opinion, it's none of our business until we can get our own house.
500 feet away from
the community. If I was in my home and my family members were ill and their lives were deteriorating and I was being mandated to go out to my neighborhood to help other families first, I would put
really thought trouble from this one.
I would not leave my own home to help the people in my neighborhood before I helped my own family, and I feel like that's what we're doing. And so we're spending millions and millions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars in other countries, while we're spending millions and millions of dollars, actually $1.7 trillion in dependency creating programs that do not help to overcome their circumstances or their underlying causes in this country, and ignoring the fact that these are our community members. We can hold people accountable. That includes the people that are on drugs. The people that are on drugs are not free. They're committing crimes. They're victimizing people in the community. It is our responsibility to love them enough to remove them from their destructive path, and at the same time remove the people that are complicit in pushing these drugs, right? And then what we do is we create an industry that actually supports the overcoming of individuals, where we're addressing underlying causes, and then we're helping people to learn how to navigate society successfully outside of the problem.
Is there any government agency that you're aware of that does anything like that?
Government agencies, I am not. No, I am not aware of any. And I'm going to tell you that NGOs that accept government funding push the policies that treat this problem, which are the two dominant policies are housing first and harm reduction policies. And so our housing first policies have been extremely disruptive in the country. They're spreading across the country like wildfire. It's kind of insane to me, actually. So you had named a few cities. I will tell you that when I started to see problems in cities like Missoula, Montana, and places in Colorado adopting on these policies and the problems growing in those places, I said, this is a problem. And so people are looking to some of the western states like San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle as examples of best practices. I don't know how we can ignore the fact that we are watching over the destruction of human life, and we want to model that across the country and call that some kind of success. But I don't know any government entities or institutions that are practicing things that are pro-human.
Well, it's obvious by the results, but the details, I think, are unknown to most people. Can you explain what the housing first policy is and why it's bad?
Yeah, housing first means that people just need to be housed, and that the intention or the thought behind it is that then they will find recovery, which is absolutely untrue. So why is it bad? Because what happens is we're just sweeping the problem on the streets behind closed doors. And what I've noticed is because I worked in the industry for a period of time in the homeless sector, the shelter sector, and housing first, is that capacity equals flooding. So if these spaces, if these beds are not filled, if we're not handing out this many burritos, if we're not giving this many showers, then we are not going to be funded through government funding. There are people that are staffing a lot of these buildings, these housing first buildings, who have absolutely no idea what it's like to be in that kind of environment, let alone supervise 90 to 150 bodies of people who are victimizers, who are drug addicts, some who are elderly. They're mixing all of these different people with these pretty extreme levels of vulnerability inside of these buildings. And what we have is we have the catastrophic experiences that we're looking at on our streets all behind closed doors and trapped. And we're seeing more people actually die of overdose deaths. There's more, we have cartel engagement in some of these buildings. We have violent experiences that are going on, murders, rapes, thefts, all kinds of things going on inside these buildings. And we have our government officials that are claiming that these places are a benefit, that they are blessing people's lives, that they are some sort of solution to the problem. And we're spending a ton of money to exacerbate the problem.
Where is this guy?
And we're snowing the voter, we're snowing the taxpayer, and telling them that these things are actually working.
I assume the landlord is doing pretty well on this deal, like Section 8.
The landlord are the NGOs.
Yeah, the NGOs.
Yeah, the NGOs. I mean, that's sort of like a pro-capitalism sort of piece, right? There are the builders, the developers that have the relationships with the politicians, who are then going in and building these massive structures, and then we have the NGOs that are fundraising to get the money to buy these buildings, and then managing these buildings. We're also pushing the harm reduction, processes inside of these buildings, where inside of these buildings they're handing out the drug supplies. They're doing everything they can to keep the people suspended in the problem that they're trying to remove.
Are they allowed to use drugs in the facilities?
100%. 100%.
Well, I mean, wouldn't it just be why? Why would taxpayers pay for the housing if people were continuing to use drugs? Especially when there are a lot of kids living at home because they can't afford housing. I don't get that.
Yeah, well, we have to understand that these buildings, first of all, house people at 30% of their income, so they're low income. So they're federally and locally funded buildings. And if you don't have any money, 0% or $0, 30% of $0 is $0. There are a significant amount of residents inside of these buildings who just refuse to pay their rent, and then there's no eviction that takes place. I mean, and Seattle is a really great place to look at if you want to see the failed experiment in housing first. So, you know, and arguably, the kids that there's a building in Bellingham, Washington, called 22 North that houses people from 18 years old and up, where some of these kids have left home and started using drugs and some of the encampments that are really dominant in this area in Western Washington. And then they go into these youth service agencies and then they get placed in these housing developments and have to pay no rent. And then these children are often victimized inside of these buildings, and then they get turned out to, you know, trafficked, what we consider trafficked inside of these buildings. And then there's like this fortress that's around them, disabling the family unit to have any kind of contact with you to advocate for. By this time, these kids are so strung out on the drugs. I mean, it's really, really destructive. And then our government is paying for this. So they're having money on a regular basis to pay for this. And then they're handing out the drugs and they're doing all of these things. And so I've been doing some
Bro, that guy will not leave me alone. I know it's
so we've got to understand that, you know, over the last 5 years, I've been doing a little bit of research, not enough to have a complete story to write yet, but the pharmaceutical companies that are pushing a lot of these medication-assisted treatment drugs, like they have a business model, and the business model, of course, is to increase funding. We have politicians who are incentivized to, you know, push that kind of legislation, as well as the legislation that supports a lot of these NGOs and a lot of these housing structures that are popping up everywhere. And so, and then you have, like in Seattle specifically, Seattle pushes a lot of the legislation for Washington State around harm reduction and housing first. And so they, a lot of these NGOs are working in concert with academics that are doing research. Specifically, we have Caleb Vantagreen here in Washington State who's been, quote unquote, researching medication-assisted treatment or harm reduction practices for a period of time. I mean, there's a lot of money being made, through this process, through these industries. It's gross to me. I don't understand why we can't be more intentional and focus on overcoming, teaching people the skills necessary to navigate society. I mean, that's what I do in prison, and it works, and it's cost-effective. We could evolve as a country as opposed to decline and destroy our human capital.
But no one seems interested in sobriety. I mean, the official government policy doesn't demand sobriety. Sobriety's got to be the goal. Like, I'm not on anything. I think clearly I'm like a human being again. Is anyone even trying for that?
No, I was recently on a press release in September in Seattle. Bruce Harrell, the mayor there, had a press release. He was really excited to talk about $40 million funding that was going to be spent. What we're experiencing here in Washington State and across the country in different areas is a rebranding, right? After the executive order came out, Donald Trump on homelessness and all of the things that we're talking about right now, some of the officials that I was just talking about in Seattle essentially expressed via media that, well, we're already doing these things, right? So we're just seeing a rebranding of these harm reduction and housing first spaces. And so there was this conversation where Harold was talking about how many millions of dollars were going to this organization, how many millions of dollars were going to that organization. And after they were done, I raised my hand and I said, how much of this
how did I not hit him at all?
diverted to abstinence-based treatment and environments for people to come to when they want to get their life together? Because I worked in Seattle in the midst of all of this for a period of time, and person after person wanted out. First of all, it was such a glacial process with so much red tape for me to actually be able to get somebody into treatment. And this was back in, 2015, 2016, 2017. But I asked him, I said, how much of this money is going to be diverted? And there was a lot lot of word soup. It was passed from one city leader to another, and eventually the answer came back and it was $0. The thing is that, yeah, it was $0. And first they wanted to know, are you with the press? Who are you? Who are you with? I said, no, I'm not with the press. I'm with myself. I thought I'm a former social service worker. And I didn't really talk about the work that I do in the state of Tennessee. And I didn't really talk about the work that I'm doing inside of our prison system. I just represented myself like I always do when I stand up in any of these kinds of meetings. I represent the person just like me whose life is being destroyed because they can't find a way out. So, you know, we have the executive order, and here in Washington State, our leaders are saying, well, we're already doing this because these methods are a path to, and I can tell you out of the hundreds of people that I serve in that industry, I only know 2 that got clean and sober. And it's almost impossible for, yes, and I'm like not kidding when I talk about that. It's almost impossible for a person to remove themselves. And I mean, it was for me. I knew that my life was deteriorating. But because I was in an intimate relationship with drugs, Tucker, it was almost impossible for me to remove myself. Thank God for the police. Thank God for the police. We have hobbled our law enforcement across the country. We have shamed our criminal justice system into participating in the illusion that these methods, that these policies are somehow of benefit to the people on the streets. But there are a lot of people making money off of people being sick, and that's what we have to recognize. And so, you know, at the end of the day, this is the thing. I'm not going to be able to dismantle the machine. The machine is big, it is bigger than us. So we have to stop selling out for dollars. And I absolutely refuse. I will not adopt on the practices of any of these harmful policies, these harmful practices. I will not do it because I know what people are capable of. And so I try my hardest to utilize the space where people are removed, where they're clear of mind, and then implement processes to help them address their underlying causes and connect with the resources necessary once they have cleaned out the inside and refragmented themselves with common sense, and then, and only then, are the resources that are provided going to be sustainable. And so I've been busy building this I believe it will become an industry.
Shit, man! They must have crawled. Or, you know, god damn it, man.
My energy to try to dismantle is...
Bro, that was my win, man.
What I'm doing is
I gave that shit away.
I'm changing lives, and then when we have some success, will we be able to say no, and this is how it's done. And these are the human lives that are connected with the data. It's not this ambiguous stuff that sounds really good to the person that's totally confused.
Dude,
They look at there's
yes,
that says, where am I supposed to start? Right? And I think that's the common sort of response from a voter or a taxpayer or just your average community member when they are definitely walking over bodies where they have a family member that's infected. Because I have been contacted by people all over the world when they saw my pictures, and their question is always, what can I do? Because you got to imagine, if you've never been strung out on drugs, how in the hell are you going to know?
Ready for freak. Down.
Play.
I'm gonna go to Warzone. Let's go play.